Our last storyteller, before we go to intermission, describes himself as being in the early stages of failing to retire. But for the previous 35 years, he has balanced two roles, one as a faculty member of Harvard's Graduate School of Education, and the other as the executive director of the Center for Applied Special Technology, or CAST, which is a not-for-profit R&D organization devoted to improving education for disabled children. He also says he's married to the lovely Ruth Rose. I will also add wonderfully patient Ruth Rose. Will you please welcome to the stage our founder and director of Voices on the Green, Mr. David Rose.
It's a lot easier backstage. When the instructor said that he had finished grading the hour exams and would be passing them out at the end of class, dread came over me. And it was justified. When I got my blue book, there was a big F on the front cover. I was a freshman at Harvard College, and I could already see a pattern. I'd passed in 5 papers, and they all had been returned ungraded. And it said in some way that they were not up to Harvard standards, and they did not deserve a grade at all. There were other indications that I didn't belong here. One of them was a freshman across the hall had already written 2 research papers on puffins before he came to college, and I didn't even know what puffins were. And I was very proud to have a Barbra Streisand album, which was brand new. And I showed it to my roommate, and he said, "Oh yeah, she's great. I dated her in high school." The grades and the hour exam, though, shook me deeply. And I realized that I was in trouble. So I made an appointment with my freshman advisor. What was remarkable, just a complete chance, was that my freshman advisor was the dean of Harvard College. So he welcomed me to his office, and I was surprised he seemed to know who I was. And he said, "So you're from Turner, Maine. I've never been to Turner, Maine. And we've never had anybody apply to Harvard from Turner, Maine. What's it like?" And I explained it was a farming community, and not unlike Deborah's community, very small. My high school graduating class only had 33 people. And it was not certainly a place for college preparatory. Almost no kids went to college. And only a few had ever gone out of state. And my achievement scores were pretty awful, in the 400s and 500s. So it wasn't really a college kind of town, I guess I said to him. And he said, "So why did you apply?" And I said, "Well, my sister made me." And my sister, who's here today, had actually been one of the few people that had left Turner to go out of state to college. And she saw this bigger world out there, and she cared about me and wanted the very best for me. And so she came home from college and she said, "I want you to apply to Harvard." And I said, "Well, that's ridiculous. I wouldn't get in, and it costs $10 to apply and all of that." And she said, "I'll pay the application fee if you apply." And so thanks to my sister, I applied and got in. And he said then, "Why are you here today?" And then I explained about the Blue Book and the failed papers and Barbra Streisand and all of that. And said, I just don't belong here. And what I'd like to do is on Thanksgiving vacation, go home and just not come back. And he raised his finger to stop me. And this is one of the kind of powerful moments in my life. And he said, "David, I'm the dean of Harvard University. I'm also the head of the admissions committee. If anybody knows who belongs at Harvard, I do. We accepted you because we wanted you here. Now, it's obviously going to take a lot of work from both of us, so why don't we get started?" So then he says, "Now, who graded your exam?" And I said, "Bill Evans." And he said, "Oh, yeah, an instructor." Okay, so he goes, can you get me Bill Evans in the psych department?" So, all right. And he calls and, and he says, "Hi, Bill, I'm sorry that we've never met. This is Dean Monroe calling." And this is, of course, you can imagine this is some young assistant professor who's like, "What the heck is the dean of calling me about?" And he said, "I have something important I want to talk to you about. I have one of your students, David Rose, who's here, and he flunked your exam. I want to say that he's very important to me, and it's important to me that he does well here, and I'm going to need you to be helping him. Are we on the same page?" And he did some more things, but as I was walking back to my dorm, I still didn't feel I belonged at Harvard, but I did feel, I'm going to pass this course. I assume he figured that my father had given a swimming pool or something. And anyway, I was never a great student even after that, but I did graduate. 2 years later, let me get my clicker. Do I have it here? Can you click ahead for me? 2 years later, Dean Monroe, before I graduated, left Harvard entirely. Just a little while ago, I looked up, when I was preparing for this, I looked up his obituary just to see if I could find it. It was actually one of the big obituaries in the New York Times when he died. And just stay there 1 second, Thomas. I want to read the headline. "John U. Monroe, 89, dies. Left Harvard to follow ideals." And let me read you the first line of the obit. Next slide. "John U. Monroe, a white educator who gave up one of the most prominent jobs in academia, dean of Harvard College, to take a low-level, low-paying administrative and teaching job with an impoverished black college in Alabama, died on Friday, Laverne, California. He was 89. And everybody thought, what a charismatic thing to do. It was a shock when he left Harvard. And they thought, he'll do this for a couple of years and he'll come back and he'll be the president of the university. He actually never came back. He taught at that impoverished school for 11 years, and then he only changed because he went to a school that was in more trouble. And he stayed in Alabama teaching very underprivileged kids for the rest of his career. I love it that the New York Times recognized what an unbelievable thing that was. So this is a man who knew how to live by his values. 50 years later, I was unaccountably still at Harvard. I was teaching at the School of Education, and I was giving a tour for a bunch of educational leaders from Sweden. And at the end of the institute, they asked me, could you give a tour, of Harvard? And I rarely did that, but I decided to do it. And it was kind of my own personal tour. But anyway, I passed University Hall, where Dean Monroe's office was. And I stopped, and I told him the story I just told you. But in the middle of it, I had an epiphany. I realized that I had misunderstood completely where he was at that moment. And that is to say that Dean Monroe had been the key person to diversify Harvard, to push it and force it, to, in fact, invite and welcome people who were not traditionally coming to Harvard, people from inner cities in Alabama, people from rural towns like Turner, Maine. But being more of an educator than administrator, he knew it wasn't enough for Harvard to just admit people. It had to give them the help and support and the power they needed. And he needed to start it well, so he did it himself. He said, I will take the students that we know are going to have trouble. I will be their freshman advisor. I was Dean Monroe's test case for living his values before he tried it out in the much bigger world. As I stood on those steps, I want to read this because I'm afraid I'm going to get too emotional. As I stood on those steps, telling the story I just told you, but now with this new understanding of exactly what had happened, I was overcome with emotion, with a deep sense of belonging. It wasn't that I felt I belonged at Harvard. I had never really felt that I belonged at Harvard, even though I'd been there for 50 years. But I belonged right there, standing in the shadow of Dean Monroe's office, hosting those educators from Sweden. It felt great. Thank you.